Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar on inclusive design innovations, generously sponsored by Google. I am Irene Barry-Kurika, the founder and executive director of Enable. I'm wearing a pink top, and I also have some braids on, and I have a brown skin color. So Enable was founded in 2009 with a simple mission to empower the blind and visually impaired in Africa through computer-assistive technology. Over the last 13 years, Enable has established assistive technology labs in special schools for the blind across Kenya and enrolled more than 9,000 blind and low vision students and teachers. So digital accessibility is at the heart of everything that we do, because without accessible content, accessible devices, and accessible products and services, 15% of the global population is left out. Today, we will discuss digital accessibility and innovations. We have a fantastic panel of speakers who I'm really excited to introduce to you shortly. But first of all, we have a welcome message from our sponsor, Google. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sarah Basson, and I'm an accessibility evangelist working for Google in New York City. We are delighted to be part of this event with Enable, focused on promoting digital accessibility in Africa. Google also has a mission to promote digital accessibility. Indeed, Google's mission statement from the very beginning was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. So we are eager to increase our engagement with emerging markets and with African countries in particular through our growing relationship with Enable. And as Google develops more assistive technologies to support users with disabilities, we depend on the relationships we have with local experts like Enable to inform us about what to build and to advise us on how best to design and distribute the technologies, and also train and promote to users in Africa. We're pleased to work with Enable on this very important mission, and we hope that you enjoy today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So now I'm going to go ahead and give each of our speakers, starting off with Kolawole, then Millicent, Crystal, and then Ajit, a chance to introduce themselves. Please don't forget to give a visual description of yourself to be able to accommodate those people who are blind or visually impaired. So let's start off with Kolawole, followed by Millicent, then Crystal, and then Ajit. Please do a brief introduction.
Hi, good morning. My name is Carl Litomi. I'm a founder and CEO at Vinside Technology. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to be here today. And at Vinside, basically, we're a digital venture that uses artificial intelligence technology to aid those visually impaired to read and gain access to inclusive and community education. Thank you.
Dr. Millicent Agangeba, lecturer at the University of Mines and Technology, precise a computer science engineering department, and also the executive director of Inclusive Tech Group. Inclusive Tech is just seeks to develop affordable assistive technologies for persons with disability within the Ghanaian context, and also to create more awareness about accessibility needs of persons with disability. Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Christo de Klerk. I am the Vice President of Blind SA. That is a volunteer position. I worked as an IT specialist until my retirement, and now I have much more time to give to Blind SA. I am a white South African. I'm wearing black jeans and a grey shirt that my wife knit. Yes, as I said, I was congenitally blind, and accessibility has always been a major issue for me, and that's why I really appreciate being here and I'm looking forward to the webinar. Thank you for all who arranged it and put in all the effort and commitment to this. I can't wait for the proceedings to get underway. Thank you.
Hi, hello everyone. My name is Ajit Narayanan. I'm joining you from Mountain View in California. I have black hair and brown skin, and I'm wearing glasses, and I have a beard and a mustache. I have a black jacket on. At Google, I lead a couple of engineering teams that are focused on accessibility for people with motor disabilities and people with cognitive disabilities. Before I joined Google, I spent about 10 years running a company in India that was building assistive technology for people with speech disabilities, that was building augmentative and alternative communication devices. I'm very excited to be here today.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And I want you all to feel welcome, and we are looking forward to learning from each and every one of you. I'm very excited. I think we have, as you said, Ajit is from Mountain View. We have Christo, who's from South Africa. We have Millicent from Ghana, and we have Kolawale from Nigeria. And of course, I'm here to represent Kenya and the US as well. So thank you. And I think it will be a rich conversation with different perspectives. So to kick us off, I have a question for Kolawale. Kolawale, I hope you're ready. Can you tell us about your project that gave you, what gave you the inspiration for it? And let me mention that during the Inclusive Africa Conference 2020, Kolawale's project was the second runner-up, and he's developed an amazing product that he's going to share with us. You can tell us a bit about the inspiration, the challenges that you encountered, and how you were able to overcome them, especially in an environment, the environment that we have in Africa. And the other question is, did you involve people with disabilities during the testing phase, and what are your future plans?
Thanks so much, Irene. Nice to be here once again. I'm Klawali Thomason from Nigeria. The founder and CEO at Vinsight Technology. Vinsight basically is a digital venture that makes use of artificial intelligence to aid those who are visually impaired to have access to inclusive education by helping them to read independently. So the project started in 2018 in Nigeria. I discovered that there were lots of visually impaired persons who were losing out on inclusive education. For instance, a friend of mine had to drop out of college because of the difficulties she was facing in reading. And looking broadly and widely, we have about 26.2 million persons in Africa who suffer from the same fate, the same problem. So I took it upon myself to develop a product that aids visually impaired persons to read and navigate the environment independently. In the course of these 3 years, it's been exciting, but there have been lots of ups and downs as well, right? Like there have been lots of challenges. And I think the first challenge we faced was trying to actually develop a market fit product. It was a bit difficult to try and develop something that was really suitable for Africans, really, because yeah, definitely we have assistive technologies that helps people to read in the Western world, in the US and in Europe already, but trying to develop something that was really going to fit the African market and demographic was quite challenging. So it took us about 12 to 18 months to be able to develop that. We had to go do lots of iterations, test with lots of visually impaired populations, do lots of piloting, and eventually we're able to come up with a fitting product. So I think the most beautiful part of our project is the fact that we've actually been able to make the impact we've been looking forward to make in the past 3 years. Currently, we have about 1,000 visually impaired users who currently use our technology to read printed books independently across across 7 schools in Nigeria. Looking forward, we're working to further expand our technology. I think right now we're working on several distribution channels to ensure that we go further and go deeper into the market by ensuring that at least the next 3 years from now, we have about 50,000 visually impaired persons who can enjoy the same comfort, the same convenience like every other person in terms of inclusivity for education.
Yes, thank you so much, Kolawale. I think one of the most important things to note is that your product is just not for Nigeria, that it's actually open to the market. And as you said, because of its low cost, then it's definitely accessible to people who live in Africa, especially if you don't have a high income level. So thank you so much. I'll move on to Millicent. Millicent, maybe you can share with us what are the opportunities for assistive technology innovations in Ghana, and maybe you can touch on Africa just based on your experience, specifically on the digital accessibility space.
Yeah, thank you, Irene. And I'm glad that you emphasize on digital accessibility, because given our technology-driven world, it's very crucial. Assistive technology in every form, whether it's a hardware or software, it's very important for persons with disability in today's digital world. And as we know, when we talk about innovation, innovations are born out of research. And so I see an opportunity here because there is a vast literature on assistive technology today. A lot has been researched on it that we on the continent can harness and try to move it to another level. Modern technologies also in existence, IoT, artificial intelligence. We can leverage on these technologies to even do more when it comes to innovation starts for persons with disability. And given that the needs of persons with disability are very contextual, we cannot generalize it. So it creates opportunity for everyone out here to innovate a local content of relevance. And so you cannot say because there is talkback on Android and there is a voiceover on iOS, so it's okay for persons with disability. Local context is always very critical for persons with disability. And so we can still create local content to fit the specific needs of persons with disability. The growing adoption also of smart devices on the continent, and even in Ghana, if you look at the penetration of smartphones, it's quite very high, over 80%. And so we on the continent, we can see this provides a platform for us to actually deploy digital assistive technologies, and also compared to what the conventional assistive technologies, the things that they are not able to address. I mean, given the platform, the smart devices can help us to be able to develop more local content. And I emphasize on local content because the needs of persons with disability always differ from content to content. I believe also there is opportunity, not only in Ghana, but for all of us in Africa, because of the large pool of mentors. And we talk of innovation hubs, incubators, accelerators globally. And we have the opportunity, I mean, to enrich our expertise, okay? And in Ghana here, there are a lot of young, talented developers, and all we need to is to rearrange their thinking to understand the accessibility needs of persons with disability. And there are innovators all over, and I believe that they can get the opportunity to be mentored, to enrich their expertise, so that together we can always end up thinking of something very novel for persons with disability. Anything that can improve the functional capabilities of persons with disability, I think it's the right step to improve upon their livelihood. Irene?
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Millicent. I can tell you're so passionate about this topic.
Oh, yes, I am. You know, personally, I'm also physically challenged. And so, I mean, I was even crippled when I was a kid, and it took a lot of medical interventions to work. So I think issues of disability, I get a bit more passionate about it. And also moving into the fact that I ended up in computer science as a computer scientist, I think it gives me more passion.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thank you so much. So we value your experience and your input in this conversation. And you raise a very important point. This week, I'm trying to figure out, I was answering a questionnaire, and there was a question about do we think, and I may not say it correctly, but the whole idea was, do we think the reason maybe disability or assistive technologies are not successful in Africa is because it's not general for all disability, we are more targeted, something like that. And my response was, this is a very confusing question because number one, every disability is very different and you cannot mix disabilities. You have to think about the different needs of each disability, even when you're developing products and services. What actually happens, you may come up with solutions that actually serve different disabilities, but if you don't focus on a disability and try to understand it and try to develop products correctly for that specific group and think you can develop products for everybody, for all the disabilities at once, then you're going to miss the point. So it's interesting that you raised that question, that point during the discussion. So I do appreciate that. Yeah, thank you. So maybe we should, let's proceed. We have a poll and maybe I'm going to ask our audience to join the poll. And we have a very simple question. And the question is, I'm going to read it aloud. What would help increase innovation in assistive technology in your country? What would help increase innovation in assistive technology in your country? Number one is funding. Number two is knowledge transfer and education. Number three is skills training. Number four is other. You can post on the chat if you think it's something different. If your answer doesn't show up on the chat, and please, you can go ahead and post your answer and we'll read it aloud. Okay, here we go. This is very interesting. What would help increase innovation in assistive technology in your country? 33% said funding. Another 33% said knowledge and education. And another 30% skills and training. And then one more person said something different, 4%. So I have to say, I actually agree with this poll because I feel that, in my opinion, this is a mix. It's not one, because you'll find that you get all this knowledge, you get all this training, you work together with partners, you transfer the knowledge, you get the right education and accessibility. If you don't find the funding, it becomes very difficult for you to develop the right products and services. So it's a combination of all these factors. And sometimes what we find is that there's always, you find people lean on one direction. We need to do knowledge transfer and education, but we also have to remember funding is a critical piece for us to be able to succeed, for us to be able to develop the right products and products for the African market. Then we need to make sure that their investments, really, they're proper investments in the space. So I definitely agree with this poll. I don't know if anyone else had something to say about the poll. Any of the speakers? Ajit, do you want to say something first?
Thank you, Irene. I agree completely with, I think, the way that you articulated it. All of these three things are vitally important. You know, we do want to empower people. We don't just want to build technology, right? Technology that we build, companies that we build, startups that we incubate, all of that is in aid of people having access to educational opportunities, people having equitable opportunities for employment and social inclusion. And I think the way that you said it, you know, skills being important, knowledge being important, and funding being necessary to get all of that engine running effectively, that's exactly what you well.
Fantastic. Millicent, do you want to say something?
I couldn't agree less. Absolutely, I agree with the polls. I think these are critical and very important ingredient for us to succeed when it comes to developing assistive technology. We need the funding. And we also need the knowledge. We need to research more to be able to innovate well and to meet the needs of the persons with disability within our context. And then also that knowledge that we get, we need to have a way of transfer. And then even training, when we get it, it's not like you have it and the persons with disability can use it. So training becomes a key part of it, trying to let them know how to use it, regular upgrade of their knowledge on the product from time to time, so that the efficiency in use can be achieved. So I absolutely agree.
Fantastic. Christopher, do you want to say something?
I was going to say, with the poll, I thought that there was an option missing. The option should be to establish a sense of caring, just giving a damn to do it. Because I find that that is very often an issue why things are not accessible, because people just cannot be bothered to do it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I'm busy reading the chat, and one person has posted, tech for people with disabilities is booming around the world. So where is the funding? She's posted an article on innovations and minorities. So if anyone is interested, there's a link. But I've just read something really interesting. Someone else says, I think Caitlin says, it's difficult for healthcare professionals and relevant stakeholders to prioritize the development of assistive devices for PWDs when many individuals in our context aren't even receiving their basic health rights and needs. Millicent, do you want to respond to that?
I think that, well, there's truth in what she or he is saying, but then we should always give a place to technology, especially in our world today. And so healthcare can far much more be improved in every sense. If you take, for instance, the era we are in now, dealing with COVID-19 and so on and so forth. Think about healthcare provision for, say, mental patients, how is it going to be like? Because if you come to a place like Ghana, the ratio of psychiatric even to the mental patient is like 1 to 150,000. And so if we have telemedicine, which in any way for a person with disability or not, which can help to have easy access. I mean, they can know what to do. Caretakers can have a coping mechanism in terms of crisis through this means. Even if it's not a direct access, somehow they will know what to do. And so we cannot say we have to solve all basic problems. Everything is a right in our days.
Thank you. Thank you. Ajit, you want to say something? You look like you're ready to respond.
I think Millicent brought up a really interesting point here. Even in the US or in other countries that are considered to be advanced, so to speak, in the in accessibility and assistive technology and the rights of people with disabilities, it's important to realize that that's a pretty recent phenomenon, right? 50 years ago in the US, I think the situation was, I don't think there was anything to distinguish one country from another in terms of how oppressed the population of people with disabilities were and how limited access was to education and employment and all of these other things. There's always a certain group of individuals with disabilities who advocate very fiercely for themselves, and they demand assistive technology. They demand the best opportunities that they can achieve in life. They demand that people treat them equitably and solve their problems as if it is humanity's problems. And these individuals become the role models around which I think society coalesces, even in countries like the US, right? You have laws that are passed because people fiercely advocate for some of these things. We have role models that children with disabilities aspire to grow up and emulate. So I think it's important to, of course, acknowledge that there's basic needs, health, safety, these things are important. And, there's no denying that access to those things can be the most important thing for a person who is in that situation. But empowering people that are motivated and ambitious, and people who can achieve everything that people without disabilities can achieve, I think that raises the bar for the entire community. And investing in people like that with assistive technology, with advances, with innovation, I think it has outsized returns. And maybe the situation that we see in the US today is a reasonable example of how much we can achieve if we empower the most powerful voices in this community.
Thank you, Ajit. And I feel that this is where the opportunity for Africa lies, because Africa is just evolving when it comes to technology. We're still in the baby stages. So the point is, as we develop products, whether they're healthcare products, whether they're educational products, employment products, if we ensure we are designing products that are inclusive to everyone, meaning that 15% of the global population has some form of disability. So when you're developing your product, you have to think about your users. Who are your end users? Your end users, you don't really just say, my end users are people without disabilities. It's always a specific. You can say, I'm developing a product for Ghana, for people who live in Ghana. But it doesn't mean you'll say, it does not include people with disabilities. So my point is simple. If Africa can sort of adopt the whole idea of making sure that as we design products, we are thinking about the needs of every person who's about the clear demographic of the target market, I think we'll be able to deliver on that. So that there's sort of an excuse all the time that we are developing this product, but it's expensive to develop for people with disabilities, or it's not possible because they're a very small population. I think each one of us sitting on this panel has had that conversation before. So I think the whole idea is to encourage everyone to really think about inclusive design and to realize that the people with disabilities have it's a huge market that has not been tapped. So as we develop our digital products and services, we need to make sure that we are inclusive to everyone. So I'll move on to
Irene, just to say something, I think they should think about the fact that it's even more expensive to have over 1 billion population being liability.
That's true. That's definitely true. Yeah. And I think that's the point that sometimes businesses miss, even governments, that the 15% of the global population that you mentioned are actually people who need educational services. They need employment services. They can actually earn a decent living. They buy products and services. So, and I think part of the issue of addressing digital accessibility is where businesses begin to understand, oh my God, there's this population that I've been leaving out, but they still use my products and they struggle to use my products. So what can I do to get more people to use my products at the end of the day, which of course affects my bottom line. So let me move on to Crystal. I have a question for you, Crystal. What are some of the challenges persons with disabilities in South Africa face today, especially in terms of accessing essential services? It would be great if you can give us some specifics and maybe make some recommendations of how some of the issues you experience can be resolved.
Thank you very much. As I mentioned earlier, I work as a volunteer for Blind SA, which is a national non-profit organization of blind and partially sighted persons. The organization has 30 branches across South Africa, and we strive to empower blind and partially sighted persons in every aspect of their lives and throughout their lives. And one of our major functions has become advocacy. I think your personal finances must be your most private, most confidential business. And it is just not acceptable to have to do that through a third party, through a sighted person. it is a violation of your rights if you cannot personally, confidentially attend to your own finances. Now that is where most of our banks fail and violate the rights of their blind clients. Blind SA has been an activist in this area for many years. And the banks are at different stages. And I'll give you a short history of what's been happening. Around about 2014, a group was established. Quite coincidentally, it was called Enable Network. And they were engaged by the Banking Association of South Africa, BASA, to examine accessibility. And the accessibility is not merely in respect of visual disabilities, but banking accessibility in general, to investigate accessibility and then to produce a report. They've done thorough work. They had many consultation sessions all over the country. It took them about 18 months to put together their report, which they then submitted to BASA.
Mm-hmm.
And it was quite a damning report because the banks, most of them, failed dismally in accessibility. Bank websites not being accessible, ATMs not being accessible, not to blind people, not to people using wheelchairs, that sort of thing. So then BASA requested them to, instead of submitting the PDF document, they wanted them to submit an editable Word document, which they were not keen to do at all. Why would they want an editable document? Did they want to water it down? So there was a bit of acrimony and nothing ever came of that project. For about another 18 months, the matter just lay with the Banking Association. Blind SA then advocated again, and we pushed with the Banking Association to proceed with the matter. And then we had some engagements. And we were given a person at BASA to negotiate with, and it looked like things might happen again. We had several sessions. They then employed a new team to look at accessibility.
Oh, no.
It was a meaningless report. So at that stage, Blind SA decided that years have elapsed. There's been no progress. The next option would be to submit the matter to the South African Human Rights Commission. We arranged a meeting with the Human Rights Commission where I did I did a presentation on accessibility and explaining all about the WCAG, the Web Accessibility Content Standards. And the commissioner who handled the matter, Advocate Malachi, he is a blind person himself, and he prioritized the matter. He said it was of extreme importance and our rights were being violated. And we had one meeting after that, and again the matter has just died. And I thought to myself, if this is a matter that's been prioritized, what happens to the matters that are not prioritized? So we are at the stage now when we try to follow up with the Human Rights Commission. Our phone calls are not even answered. Quite coincidentally, a few months after we submitted the banking matter to the Human Rights Commission, we also took up the point with the SA Human Rights Commission that their own website is not accessible. And again, they prioritized it. Needless to say, 2 years later, it is in still no better situation.
Wow.
Now, as I mentioned, that banks are at different stages. I must commend ABSA Bank. ABSA through the years has employed many blind people. Most of its telephonist branches were blind persons. It even employed, we were 5 IT specialists, programmers who were blind, working at ABSA at the same time. So they've always had a commitment towards blind persons. Now, their smartphone app is 100% accessible. It is a pleasure to use. And when something goes wrong with accessibility, we've got contact people, we phone them, they fix it. When they want to update the app, when they have a new feature they want to introduce, they contact me, and then video sessions with a beta version of their app to make sure it is absolutely accessible and it works fine. So they need to be commended. Their website is usable by blind persons. It's not really a pleasure to use, but it's usable. But the app, and most people I believe use the app rather than the website. The app is fine.
Okay.
Then another bank, Capitec, their app was also a model of accessibility. Then unfortunately, they broke the accessibility. But they are working together with a blind volunteer who is a technical person who's assisting them in putting back the accessibility. So Capitec is doing something about it. Standard Bank had a very motley history. They had some great initiatives. We had a workshop once. They had a whole team of lady programmers with a new app they were busy developing for standard accessibility. There was a hype and an excitement. And then soon afterwards, it died. Then there was a new person working for them. He took up accessibility. They engaged with many blind persons to improve the app. And then the person who initiated the initiative left the bank and nothing came of it. At this stage, every subsequent update of the app breaks accessibility even more. So Standard Bank clients are really battling with it. And we are not making any headway there. So at this stage, it looks like the only option that remains now is going to be litigation. So that is where we are with banking accessibility.
Wow. Crystal, thank you so much for sharing that information. And you've raised several issues across the board, and that situation is not unique to South Africa. It's interesting because Enable last year partnered with Kenya Bankers Association and FSD Kenya, and we did a case study as well as a technical accessibility assessment. And the whole point was we wanted to find out, what do people with disabilities say about banking products? What do people with disabilities say about their user experience when it comes to a mobile app and or even a website. And what we found was that less than 30% of people with disabilities use mobile money applications and websites from the banking industry, simply because they're not accessible. 90% prefer to walk into the bank and get help. And you can imagine with COVID, when we are doing this study, it's during COVID. So for them, they were struggling a lot because you're being encouraged not to go into the bank. The point you raised is that there's no privacy, there's no security, because if a product is not accessible, you have to rely on a third party to actually help you to access your banking information. So definitely right there, the banking service that you're receiving is completely compromised, because safety, privacy are like the key pillars of a banking product. So, and we also found that people who are deaf during COVID suffered a lot when it came to banking products and services. They felt that they were not properly understood and the products did not really cater to them. So for the blind, most of the products were really not accessible. So it was a very interesting study. It's actually on the Enable and the Kenya Bankers Association website, so you can actually see it. So the reason we're talking deeply about this issue is because that situation is not unique to South Africa only. I'm sure it's the same thing in Ghana, Nigeria, or any other country across the world. But it's important to understand that people with disabilities value their privacy when it comes to financial services. And it's important for them to be independent. But I think the way this will be resolved, it has to begin from the CEO's office. If the leadership does not embrace accessibility, we will continue to go around in circles. And the reason I say this is that you'll find employees who are very passionate about disability in the banking sector, and they're ready to make a difference. But if the leadership does not embrace this, if the leadership does not allocate budgets, because everything adds up to, if a website has to be fixed, if a mobile app has to be fixed, a budget has to be allocated. If this employee or staff member does not have the budget, there's nothing they can do. So the biggest issue when anyone is talking about embracing accessibility, we ask, what does the leadership say? Because if the leadership says we embrace accessibility, they will support the process. Without that, then it's very, very difficult. So maybe I'll move on to the next question, because I think we are almost running out of time, and I'll go to Ajit. My question for you is, why is accessibility important to Google? And how does Google approach making its products more accessible for users with disabilities?
Yes, thank you, Irene. I think Google's interest in accessibility also broadly reflects how other large technology companies think about accessibility today. For us, I don't think there is a commercial motive that is the driving force for our investment into accessibility. There are several hundreds of people, engineers and other professions at Google that are exclusively focused on accessibility, and all of this investment is driven from a deep sense of responsibility. I think Google's products are used by billions of people, all over the world, and we feel an extremely strong sense of moral obligation to make sure that no one is left behind in being empowered by these products. I would say that our work in accessibility broadly falls in three categories. I'm wearing the engineer hat to answer this part of the question. So from an engineering perspective, I would say there are these three broad categories. The first is just making our own products accessible, right? So we know that today much of the world has moved to digital platforms for performing tasks that even very recently required human interaction. I think that's an opportunity as well as something to be careful about. If we can make these digital platforms accessible and welcoming of people with disabilities, we can in some sense make the effect of the disability minimized when it comes to performing these tasks these activities of daily life that could be intermediated by apps and by websites. Google's platforms, the two big platforms that Google has today, each of which have more than 2 billion users, are Android and Chrome, both of which are products that Google created. Through Android, we support an app ecosystem with millions of app developers who create tens of millions of apps. On Chrome, we empower people who are on the web, people who create content on the web to publish information. And so by investing in accessibility features on Android and on Chrome, we're actually magnifying the effect of how technology can be used, not just within our own products, but also through our products for other people that have apps and have websites that are accessed through Android and Chrome. So that's the first category, investing in accessibility for these platforms. The second category is creating developer tools, creating infrastructure that makes it easy for people in the broader community of engineering professions to make their own apps more accessible. So if someone is creating an Android app, for example, they use a software called Android Studio, and Android Studio has a number of different accessibility features that make it easy for a developer to make their own app accessible. Now, Christo just gave us an example of how not all developers take advantage of all of these things, and there is certainly an education gap when it comes to teaching developers to be more appreciative of some of these tools and helping them understand the importance of catering to people with disabilities. But if we didn't have these standards and we didn't have these tools, then developers would be in a position where they would not be able to make their products accessible without putting in an extraordinary amount of effort. So we think that investment is really important as well. And the third vertical is what we consider novel technologies or novel applications of technologies like machine learning and artificial intelligence that Google is uniquely, I think, positioned to be at the forefront of. We've developed a few products that people with disabilities are using now, and these products are available for free. They're available as apps on the Play Store that people can download. A couple of examples there. One is an app called Lookout, which some of you may have heard of. It's an app for people who are blind, and it provides an audio commentary about the world around you by looking through your camera on your smartphone. And it's an app that's been it was very novel when it first came out, and it's also empowering in many daily contexts because it does act as an extra visual support for people who are blind and who have low vision. Another example is an app called Live Transcribe. This is an app which has been enormously popular within the hearing impairment and deaf communities. It provides a running transcript of everything that the person that is being spoken in the person's vicinity, and that's been enormously popular within classrooms, within just any sort of social circumstances. So those are where Google's investments in accessibility are focused. I think we still have some way to go in terms of actually taking these products and awareness about these products to people around the world, particularly in Africa, where we have to do more to raise awareness, to train people, and to be able to center our product development on the specific needs of people in Africa. But that is a priority for us going ahead, and I'm looking forward to Google investing much more in empowering people in Africa with disabilities.
Fantastic. I'm thinking of so many things when you're speaking, because one of the things that you raised indirectly is that when you think about accessibility, the beauty of it is you'll come up with a lot of creativity and a lot of innovations. And some of these innovations that you come up with are actually not just used by people with disabilities alone. They benefit everyone. And I'll give an example of the transcript that you just talked about. One time I was at a conference, and one of the speakers was American and was speaking very, very fast. But some of my colleagues there are from other countries, and English is not their first language. So one of the guys just picked up his phone, turned on the app, and the rest of the team was able to follow by just reading the captions as it was transcribing. And nobody there had a disability. And that's a huge advantage, that when you develop a product, it actually benefits more than just people with disabilities, which is important. So thank you so much for that. I think I have a question for you. So hold on one second. Someone is asking, to what degree does Google involve the disability community in Africa in its accessibility and innovations efforts? Someone says, as an example, Google TTS got a Nigerian English voice in the last 3 years, which was fantastic. So maybe you can give some input on that.
Yeah, I do want to emphasize that we have much more to do. And I think in the next few years, you will see a lot more happening here. But to lift the curtain a little bit and give you a peek under the curtain of what goes into creating technology for people with disabilities and Google. We try very hard to have what is called participatory design. So participatory design means that the individuals who are developing a product for people with disabilities, the engineers at Google, we try very hard to work with the disability community to not just test our products, but also to even understand what the needs are, what the priorities are, and to give our users a seat at the table as we come up with some of these products. So there's an entire, there are entire textbooks written about how participative design is done and how companies can adopt some of these participative design processes to make the engineering process itself more inclusive. And we've certainly tried very hard to be able to do that as we create some of these products. We think that our engagement in Africa specifically is going to certainly take the form of partnering with organizations that might connect us to people with disabilities. We also have to lean in on where we do have a physical presence in Africa. So Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, all of these countries are places where Google does have offices. There are other countries as well. And a combination of, I think, some presence on the ground and some magnification through organizations like Enable, like other organizations that are doing great work in Africa, I think will help us lean in on this participative design philosophy that pervades, I think, quite a lot of our recent work in the accessibility space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. I have a question for Millicent. How can we help in ensuring PWDs access higher education in Africa? The person says, honestly, accessibility is in a bad situation at universities in Africa. I'm reading directly. So what do you think needs to happen?
I think that first of all, we have the very weak fundamentals. We need to put in a framework that I mean a policy framework, a very strong one. It should start from there. When we have a strong policy in place, then we can begin to, as it were, regulate some of these things. Inclusivity, even in Ghana here, I think way back 2012, 2015, the government of Ghana promulgated the inclusive education policy. But where is inclusive education here in Ghana? We're still way behind. And so the political will also has a role to play here. But then, Irene, to be honest, I think that the way to go is for us to incorporate disability studies right from start into our syllabus. I have always advocated for that because people don't understand issues of disability at all. I quite remember I was doing some research on electronic government services because you know how government services are, they are kind of monopolized and you don't have any other alternative. So they started saying electronic passport, just go online and get your forms filled and so on and so forth. So I was wondering, how accessible are these things if we have to all go online and everybody is going to do that? And when I talked to one of the developers, actually, who was developing this application, the question was, do blind people also use computer? Can you believe it? And this is a developer developing government applications. So that developing for self instead of the user, it's always a problem. And then there is that design reality gap at the end of the day. So I would say for inclusive education and for accessibility to education, it hinges strongly on policy. It has to be something that the government has to have the political will. And then we all definitely who are advocates to continue to create that awareness. But it's such a difficult thing. Currently, I, for one, am trying hard to see through inclusive tech how we can have a more inclusive laboratory here. Because where I lecture now, it's going to be difficult for anybody who is disabled, blinded to say, I'm coming to school here. It's difficult. There is nothing, no screen readers, nothing to support the person with disability. And so if you indicate any disability, the tendency that you be turned down is very high. And so there is a long way to go. There's a long way to go. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I agree with you, and I believe with inclusive policies, we need proper implementation frameworks as well as proper investments, because if we don't have any of that, then the policy is as good as nothing. So to wrap up, we are out of time. I'll give each speaker a chance to speak, and I'll start off with Crystal. And I want you to answer one last question, which is, what do you think we need to do in Africa to increase investments and develop assistive technology innovations? 1 minute, Crystal.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. And I, from my side, wish to commend Google for the commitment they have been putting into accessibility over the years. Yeah, what to do in Africa? I think, a drive to produce a greater awareness of the needs and to rally those with political power that also have the political will to do these things. And, when it comes to accessibility, a very important aspect is make it accessible from the start. Don't try and fix it later, because that is what becomes really expensive. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and keep well, everyone.
Thank you, Crystal. Millicent, you want to go next?
Okay, Irene. So I think it goes back to what I said. We have to create the awareness from the beginning and incorporate disability into our syllables, then make a conscious effort at inclusive education. When people become more aware, what I see is that it's opened up their brains to possibilities. So we begin to see people innovating things because they understand the issues of disability. And then also, eventually, there will be the urge to invest, because somebody will be willing to just give a small donation when he understands the essence and the significance of assistive technology. And together, we can have a more inclusive society. Thank you.
Thank you, Millicent. I actually agree with you, because what you find in the industry, in most industries, is that most people who handle some of the products we are talking about, whether it's websites or mobile money applications, first, they don't understand disability. So how do you expect them to understand accessibility? So it's sort of unfair. So education is very, very critical. Ajit, closing remarks from you?
I think it's been fantastic for me to listen to some of the perspectives and some of the questions here. The one point that I would leave folks with is that it's not only the responsibility of people with disabilities to make the world better for individuals with disabilities, right? To a large extent, the world is the unfairness of inaccessibility is the result of people without disabilities being inconsiderate to the needs of people who have disabilities. And I think it's the responsibility of individuals who don't have disabilities to really fix the problems that we've created by creating an inaccessible world in many places. I would love to see the voices of people with disabilities amplified, but I would also love to see more empathy from people who don't have disabilities to realize that when we invest in making the world more accessible, but we're helping ourselves, right? We all want to live in a world which has equal opportunities. Sometimes we're building for future versions of ourselves because many disabilities they seem very far away when you're young, and when you grow older, you do start seeing your vision fade and your hearing fade, and then you start you cared more about disability and accessibility when you were younger. So I think that's the thought I would leave you with. It's not a question of technology; it's a question of fairness. It's a question of doing the right thing, and so accessibility is important to all of us. And I think it's a commitment that we should all make together.
Thank you, Ajit. I completely agree with you, and each of us will experience some form of disability at some point in life. And whether it's through temporary disability due to illness or old age or anything else. At the same time, 70% of disabilities are hidden. So even on this panel, I'm sure some people have no idea who has a disability, but also we walk the streets thinking there's no one with a disability around me, yet people with disabilities are all around us, but we don't even realize. So it's important to really invest in accessibility of products and services. At the same time, I think something that's important to learn is that disability and accessibility is a whole learning process. It's a complex space. Even the first world is still trying to figure it out. But the most important thing is just to be open to learning. For those who are living the life with a disability, you are learning every day. We are learning every day for those of us who are contributing or participating in this space. We need to be very open-minded. Each disability is very different. Each disability has very different needs. And then when you add the aspect of technology, you complicate the entire situation. So it's important to start from a point of knowing that I'm open to learning. I'm open to understanding disabilities. I'm open to understanding the various needs of each disability. And then when you bring in tech, you have to understand the impact of technology on the various disabilities. So it's a learning process. We continue to learn, we continue to push, and we hope the leadership in most organizations in Africa can join us, because without the leadership, it's very, very difficult to succeed. I have to commend all the civil society groups that have been working in disabilities for so long and pushing the agenda. I think having the issue of technology now coming to the table is a blessing for most of us, because before nobody was interested in discussing the issue of technology. People didn't understand how important it is for people with disabilities. But now if the leadership can connect people with disabilities with their bottom line, with their end products and their bottom line, then we will all succeed. So thank you so much to all our fantastic speakers on our panel today. Thank you to Google for sponsoring today's event. And before you go, I'd like to mention that actually today we are launching the Inclusive Africa Conference Innovations Award, which is a $10,000 award that we give during the Inclusive Africa Conference, and it focuses on digital accessibility innovations. So please submit and share the link with anyone in the continent. It's of course limited to participants in the continent. Then we are able to give you, if you win $10,000, you can use it towards continuous development of your product. Also, the recording for this webinar will be available online, and you can also sign up for the Inclusive Africa Conference, which will take place on September 30th, 2021. It's free to attend and it will be virtual. So you can go to Inclusive Africa and you'll find a registration link on the website. Thank you so much for your time. I know we went a few minutes over. I thank everyone for staying on. Please keep the conversation going beyond today and follow us at enable.org and use the hashtag A11Y Africa 2021. Thank you, everyone, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.